Hello everyone and welcome back to The Knowledge. Yes, once again we are here to give you guys as many tips and hints and tricks that Finlay McAndrew, who's with me again, I'll get my nod in the right direction eventually, full of great knowledge when it comes to obviously our independent sports, mine being cycling, Finlay's being triathlon. Today we're going to dig even deeper now into running, and obviously last week we spoke an awful lot about selecting your shoes for road running. So if you haven't seen that episode, do go back to last week's episode. They're all in the playlist. This week, we're going to talk about off-road, because right now, lots of people are taking up running, keeping themselves fit, and one of my favourite places to go running is in the trees. So Finn, first of all, how are you this week?
Too bad, thanks, Jimmy. Pretty bit sore after an FDP test this morning on the bike. So
I know that pain. I had one last night as well. I hate my coach. So, yeah. So, right, Finn, let's cut to the chase pretty quickly. We spoke an awful lot in the last episode about running and how important it is to pick your shoe, depending on what kind of running you're doing and how you might need multiple shoes. Obviously, there's a huge difference in shoe structure and the sole and everything when it comes to off-road, but as well as stability and all these sort of things, which we will go into during this quick chat. What is the biggest difference between a road shoe and an off-road shoe? Because there are different off-road shoes as well, which we'll talk about. But what's the main differences between road and off-road?
Well, yeah, there's two really sort of critical differences with a road shoe and an off-road shoe. So the first element we look at is stability. So as we discussed last week, when we're running on the road, it's a very continuous action, very repetitive. We're always landing on the outer edge of our foot and then rolling in the way. So the outer edge of our road shoe is always designed with a crash pad on the outside of the sole that then slows the speed of the movement in. Now, if you apply that to a trail shoe, that can then cause some issues, because when we're running off-road, the surface is really varied and uneven, and cambers are also at lots of different angles. So we're always landing in different positions. We can land on the inside of the shoe, the front, the back, anywhere. So the shoe, first of all, was designed with a much more uniform construction and support built the whole way around the sole, so that you don't tend to have this crash pad on the outer edge to slow them down. And this is commonly why people can find a trail shoe or an off-road shoe a bit harder, or a bit, they feel like their legs are a bit more tired if they run on road or hard surfaces in them, because it just doesn't do as much for them on that type of surface as a road shoe does. The next thing with that difference on a trail shoe is off-road shoes then aren't designed with the same spectrum of support as a road shoe is. So road shoes are basically designed on a scale of support to kind of stop that inward rotation. But again, if we apply that to an off-road shoe, even if somebody needs a little bit of additional support in their shoe for running the road to control some extra movement, if you actually had that denser foam in an off-road shoe and they landed on a big camber or a rock, it could just throw their ankle out as well. So a trail shoe is designed with this support all the way around through the sole to give support. It's still got lots of arch support, but it's designed to give you medial and lateral stability in a different way. The next differences we're really looking at is then grip and durability of tread and a different type of protection. So if you're running on a trail, you're quite often coming across sharp objects. And if you land on a sharp rock or a tree root in a really cushioned shoe, even if it's really padded, that can go straight through the sole. So trail shoes and off-road shoes can still be quite protective, but typically they'll have some form of added protection in the form of like a rock plate. That can be a sheet of nylon. It can be a type of plastic TPU that's really flexible, but it gives really good protection from something from coming through the sole. Again, these are features which can make the shoe feel harder and stiffer when you're running on the road, but what that then provides amazing protection when you're off-road. And then with the grip, if you're on a road shoe on trail, like if it's bone dry, you can get away with a road shoe on trails. That I've been up in the Pentlands before and done most of the skyline in a road shoe when it's been absolutely bone dry for weeks. Still wouldn't necessarily recommend that, but a trail shoe will have that added tread and added grip to give you more confidence and stability, and they'll tend to use slightly more durable rubbers. Again, if you run with a road shoe on off-road, it's pretty easy to just cut the rubber up on the sole. And I see lots of shoes where somebody's run off-road in them, and then, you know, the rubber's peeling away, and they've kind of, their shoes don't last as long because they've used it on terrain it's not designed to be used on.
So one of my question was then going to be, can you get away with using, obviously the running shoes, when you get to this kind of neck of the woods, it can be quite expensive, and can you get away with using your normal everyday running shoe that you're using maybe for, you know, your longer runs? We spoke about last time the difference in the kind of shoes that you need for different kind of durations and different sort of time periods when you're running. I was just to see if you could get away with it. It says that you can, but the conditions have to be almost like perfect conditions, and where we are in Scotland, it's pretty rare you've got those perfect conditions. Plus, it just takes a couple of rocks, or like you say, a root or something like that, and you're leading yourself down the road to quite a quick injury, potentially rolling of an ankle or worse, you know, or you know, falling over and maybe breaking something potentially, especially if you there's not as much support there. Plus, you're going to ruin your shoe. So if you can stretch the budget to buying a pair of off-road shoes, and we'll go into what kind of different kind of off-road shoes you can have in a minute, definitely worth the investment.
Yeah, I mean, the irony is it feels like, yeah, you're spending more, but in the long run, you are actually saving more money, because if you run in your road shoes off-road, you're just going to ruin them. And then when you go back and run on the road, you're going to wear them out. So yes, it might be a little, you know, it seems like a lot if you're to go and buy two shoes. I mean, my advice would be to do a bit of trail running, it may be in your road shoes first, when when you know some terrain's going to be drier, and then you know it's not going to be too harsh, to see if you like it and if it's something you want to get into. Because that's something people worry about, is what if I buy a pair of trail shoes and then I go off onto the trails and I don't like it, you know. So that's a good way to do it. And there are a lot of hybrid shoes now where so many more people are trail running and they're trying to get off the beaten track, and there are a lot of road shoes which do have a bit more added tread. So you know, even if you think you're going to do a predominantly road running, but you quite fancy doing a little bit of trail running, you know, ask about that kind of shoe when you're looking to get some shoes, because there are a lot of road models that have almost an equivalent shoe designed with a slightly more durable tread, that would then be suitable for running on the road on like good sections of road running, that then allow you that confidence to go off on trail. What you don't want to do is buy a trail shoe that you then would run. Even like sometimes people ask, could I buy a trail shoe but do a little bit of running? That's fine if you've got a little bit of running at the start or the end, but not if you're going to do one run that's 8 or 9 miles on the road, because you will cause a problem. So that's sort of a good way. There's no one answer there, but that's kind of how I would think about it.
Yeah, that was going to be my question actually. Can you use trail running shoes? I mean, for instance, I've got some Saucony Peregrines, and they're great shoes, and you can get away with running a little bit on the road, but I would say if you are doing it 80-20 rule, 80% off-road, 20% on-road, because they are pretty unforgiving, but they're incredibly good at supporting you, and the grip's pretty intermediate, and they've got that nice solid sort of, it's like a composite kind of rock plate as well in the shoe. So from that, Finn, we've spoke about the difference between road and off-road. We're now getting into a bit more of the differences of off-road shoes. So you've obviously got your trail shoe, which you're kind of talking about predominantly right now, but you've also got another kind of shoe, which is a hill shoe or a fell running shoe. What's the main differences between them as well for people who are watching?
With a trail shoe and a hill shoe, yeah. So with a trail shoe, you're going to really be running on terrain which is quite varied, undulating, and the key thing that you're looking for there is a stickier rubber that's going to give you some traction on wet rock, and give you some added grip on those sections that you can still cover a bit of road, and if you need to go on some steeper hills, then you can. And that trail shoe will typically have a good level of cushioning to it and have a little bit of flexibility. When we start going into the hills, it's very different. So on really steep stuff, that's when it can be the most challenging, because stability is, firstly, when we're going uphill, what we want to have is good grip. So a fell shoe or a hill shoe will have quite deep lugs on the outsole, and they could be anywhere from 6 to 8 millimeters in depth. I think some are sometimes slightly even more. That's going to give you traction while you're going up the hill. Now, something people always talk about when they're going downhill in hill running is how do you keep your grip, and how do you not lose your balance. Now, this is something which is debated in hill runners, but typically what works best is shoes that are close to the ground. So the key thing with a hill shoe is not the drop, but it's the stack height. So the drop of the shoe, if we covered this last week, is the difference in height from the heel to the forefoot. The stack height is the height of like the thickness of the sole. Now, if you're running in a thick-soled shoe down a steep hill, you can see how that's you're going to go over the sides of that surface. So you want to be as close to the ground as possible, so that you've got more lateral stability and more medial stability. So a hill shoe is
it's almost like running downhill on a boat then, and the way in which I would relate that to off-road, that a lot of things across that, when you look at cyclocross, you look at mountain biking, you need traction. So what you would usually do is you'd have a wider tire off-road, and you'd have knobs or lugs on it, centre, and depending on the surface you're on, if it's Scottish terrain, you'll generally have a decent bit of grip underneath you, but also the pressure at which you're actually running those tires can really, really be key to how much grip you have as well. So there's quite a lot of similar analogies where you're actually trying to make sure you get as much surface area on the ground as possible, and keeping that centre of gravity or your foot planted closer to the ground as well. So there's less of this this rolling of your foot, and it's exactly the same with a bike, because that's the main contact point with the ground, isn't it? And it's only a small surface area, but it's amazing that you can grip on these if you get all those parts right.
Totally, because if you look at if you're riding on the road on your bike and it's wet, then you obviously letting the pressure out of your tires gives you more grip. And similar thing with a fell shoe. If you pick it up, you can almost turn them inside out. And the reason for that is when you're on that really uneven surface and the shoe's digging in, if the shoe can't twist and adapt with the surface, if it's too rigid, you're just going to go over. So again, what makes a shoe stable on flat surfaces makes it very unstable on uneven surfaces. So this is again looking at what terrain are you running and what shoe is going to be best suited to that. And there is that's where there is some subtleties in it, and people get frustrated sometimes with hill shoes because they feel like they need a lot of shoes, and that can be the case sometimes, because if you're one of the hardest terrains to run on in Scotland and anywhere is flat, wet rock, because you slide. And the issue that you can have with a fell shoe is that the lugs do need to grip into the ground to work. And as you talked about, surface area being so important, if you those lugs aren't dipping in, then you can slide on wet rock. And that's where there are quite a lot of in-between shoes. So, you talked about the likes of the Peregrine, got really sticky rubber with lugs that will dig in, but also quite a big surface area. A lot of brands are also using like Vibram Mega Grip, which is, they'll use like 5mm studs on the bottom of that. And, those sort of really tacky compounds are incredibly durable now. That used to be the issue of a tacky compound. It would wear down very quickly. But you get some really sticky soles now, which are amazing on wet rock, but will perform well on dry surfaces too. So there's you've got very much trail shoes, hill shoes, and then you've kind of got this in between bit as well. So, it's really looking at what kind of terrain you're on, and then what profile is going to work best for those individual surfaces.
Yeah. So from what we spoke about so far, if you are going to run, predominantly 80% of your runs are going to be off-road, go for a trail shoe. You can get away with running a road shoe, but you're going to risk chance of injury, roll ankle, and just basically your shoes will be mincemeat after a few weeks. Then you've got to think about the surfaces you're running on. Are you running on predominantly flat, woodland? Are you in America, running across the Nevada desert? What are you running on? Is it loose? Is it muddy? And also, are you going up and down big hills ultimately? If it's fell running, if it's hill running, go for the hill shoe. If it's a trail you're running on, which can be a country park, or it could be sort of some aspects of maybe the Pentland Hills around Edinburgh, down the borders, Glentress, you'll probably get away with a trail shoe. But if you are actually going kind of off the beaten track and ultimately scrambling up stuff, you need to be looking at a proper hill running shoe, which is got that lower stack height, so the lower depth of the sole, And it's also got more lugs, which will actually dig into the ground and give you more traction across various surfaces. Cool. What brands are we talking about, Finlay, then? So if we're looking at trail shoes to start off with, what are the kind of brands right now that you would recommend out there? Because obviously you're the man who's fitted over 10,000 pairs of shoes. You're the guy in the know. What have we kind of seen recently that's kind of changed in the market, and what would you recommend from your point of view?
One brand we talked about last week was Hoka, and they did start out in the trails in the hills in Annecy in France, and if you look at those sort of types of trails that they're running on there, it's quite harsh terrain in terms of it's quite hard running in mountainous terrain like that. It can be quite long, hard descents, a lot of rocky terrain, and the benefit of that is that Hoka shoes lend themselves very well to being very versatile. They really exploded in the market in ultra running, because people were finding when they were running sort of 40, 50 mile and longer races that their legs just weren't as tired at the end as they used to be in traditional trail shoes, because Hoka kind of bucked the trend a bit and actually started adding more. The kind of philosophy of trail running was that you would never have much cushioning in it. And people would wonder why, when they went onto trails, why they would actually, feel their muscles quite a lot. And the irony was, when trail running is meant to be quite good for injuries, people were getting more problems, sore knees. Whereas Hoka did sort of reimagine this and think this, and so Hoka's are amazing trail shoes. They're incredibly versatile. You take something like the Speed Goat from Hoka, it's amazing. It's got lots of cushioning, a rocker sole on it. So actually, if you're running on a good section of road before you get to trail, it feels amazing. But then on trails, it's really protective. It's got this Vibram rubber mega grip on the outsole, so unbelievable on wet rock. Amazing for long distance trail runs and just sort of any kind of off-road trail run that takes your fancy. There are some other really nice ones from Salomon, are a hugely dedicated alpine brand. Again, they're also from Annecy, started in the 1940s, real heritage with you would maybe hike up a hill, ski down it, or you might run down it, and they have a whole host of shoes that are designed for road to trail, and then onto trail to hill, and there's some really, really nice. I mean, Salomon have a specific shoe called the Sense Ride, where it's the first shoe ever that they've put the midsole together it's not what the material is made from, but they've put the midsole together in a specific way that reduces the vibrations going through the leg. So we talked about this last week, where oscillations and vibrations account for about 25% of the fatigue that's felt in your legs. And this Sense Ride is it's called OptiVibe. It's put together like this to stop the oscillations. And this is the sometimes tricky thing with a trail shoe, is you'll put them on, they'll always feel harder than a road shoe. And that's because of what we talked about with the really soft feeling in a road shoe working against you in a trail shoe. But there are then other technologies in these trail shoes which protect you in a different way. So don't necessarily look for that real softness with the trail shoes as well. But yeah, Salomon, Hoka, huge choice of tread and cushioning for that sort of road to trail to hill. They're two really good brands to look at. So even On shoes as well, Honor from Switzerland, Swiss Alps, there's a lot of real mixed terrain and long distance running. So I'd say that's three very good brands to look at. And then you talked about the Peregrine. The Peregrine's actually so popular that Saucony split it into two shoes. They split it into a trail shoe and a hill shoe. So you've now got what's called the Peregrine 10, which is out at the moment currently, and amazing all-round trail shoes. So if you're looking for something, that's sort of four good brands or shoes to look across.
Okay, and then last but not least, what if we're looking at a hill shoe or a fell running shoe? So I've previously had a pair of Innovates, and I thought they were brilliant. I used them pretty much across the board when I was running off road. But obviously, if you're doing a bit more hill running, a bit more scrambling, a bit more extreme off the beaten track, is Innovate the go-to brand, or is there other ones out there you can pull out?
I mean, Innovate is one of the go-to brands because they're from the Lake District. They're that's where they're born, and they're running in the best spells there are. So their shoes are, from a grip point of view, it's hard to beat the likes of a Cross Talon and a Mud Claw from Innovate. So if you are looking for maximum grip, those are the kind of shoes you're looking for. Hoka are bringing out shoes like, well, the Jaws has been out for a while, which is a more aggressive lugged shoe from them. And like I say, the Peregrine split into two shoes, where you have the Peregrine ST for soft terrain. Salomon also have some pretty aggressive lug shoes as well, but it's looking at where are you going to do your running and what type of trail you are, because even then hill shoes can be different. So if you look at Salomon and even Hawk and some of the other brands, they're using other countries as their training, their testing facility. It wasn't actually till very recently that Salomon started using the Lake District as a testing ground. Their iconic speed cross, which I'm sure a lot of people that are watching this will have heard of or tried. It's a very popular shoe. You see people walking around the streets with them, or then running in the steepest hill races in the world in them. But up until the Speedcross 4, it was never designed in the UK, and the test team came across here, ran in the Lake District, and they're like, all right, we can see the issue here. This shoe does not work on wet rock. So they totally re-engineered the shoe and started using the Lake District as a testing ground. So, but that can also then, if you're, trail running's exploded. People are going to, the likes of UTMB, people are also doing, even in triathlon, you've got extreme triathlons, exploding in Norway and Swissman and all these races. If you're going to do a race in some of these countries, it's a good idea to look at the brands that are maybe from around those locations, because ultimately that they'll probably use that terrain to test their shoes on. So, don't always just go with what's known as the greatest brand in that thing. There's never a best brand.
That's a good tip, though. It's something I hadn't actually thought about during the conversation, that if you are doing an event in a foreign country, think about what the terrain's going to be like and look at the brands that come from that country and do a bit of research on it. And that's a really good tip that I actually hadn't even thought about that. I mean, from my neck of the woods, cycling on road, you'd very rarely do that. You'd maybe do it for the classics. Okay, obviously different aspects, but I never thought about it from that aspect of running, because obviously rock is very different around the world. You get different rock across Scotland. You've got granite and you've got lead hills and you've got all these different kind of hills around Scotland. But obviously if you're going to even somewhere like the desert to run, you'd pick a totally different shoe if you're running Ara or something like that. So it's do that. Look at what they're using. Look at what the guys, the people, the ladies at the front of the race are wearing, and dig into it and see what those brands are, and do a bit of research. So that's a really good tip, that, actually, Finn. I never thought about that. But is there any other kind of sort of frequently asked questions you get, Finn, before we finish off?
Well, fit's a big thing to ask to talk about with off-road shoes. Is what size should I wear with my hill shoes? I'd say with a trail shoe, you kind of typically want to go similar to what you're wearing with your road shoe. But when you're running in the hills or the steeper slopes, definitely get something that gives you a little bit more length at the toe. Okay. Because when you're running downhill, your toe can stub off the end, and hill shoes are designed to be more compact around the sides so your foot doesn't slide in the shoe, but they're designed to specifically be longer. Don't wear them too small. I made one of the worst mistakes ever, where me and Andrew Woodruff, we decided to do the Pentland Skyline at the end of our triathlon season, and we went up and recce'd the route the week before the race, which don't think too many people do the Skyline in under 3 hours twice in a week. And we ran it on the first day, and I ran in my normal shoes, so I still had space, but I just wasn't used to 2 hours and 50 minutes running over those hills, and every single toenail was black and blue. And I had to then buy another pair of trail shoes, almost in a size too big, to it was ridiculous. I had about 3 thumb widths at the end of my toes, so I could do the race the week after. But that was an exceptionally two long runs. But just don't make that mistake. If you're unsure whether if you're teetering on the edge of half a size up, go to that next size up from there, and look at that. And that's where there's a lot that goes into with trail shoes now. There's some pretty expensive trail shoes out there now, and they are worth the money if you're doing long events. So if you're doing long ultras and things like that, iconic races like UTMB, there's race teams work so specifically with their teams and their athletes that are racing 100-mile races every week all around the world, and they have some of the best runners doing that. And uppers are made now out of like Kevlar, really lightweight uppers, so, and that will really reduce the chances of irritation. So pay a lot of attention to fit when it comes to a trail shoe. It is so important, and that's where, you know, looking at socks as well and things like that. Trail socks can be a lifesaver. So never ever wear cotton when you're running off road, because your feet will get really wet in cotton, won't dry. Wool-based socks can be amazing. Merino wool and mohair is amazing, coming from goat wool. Dries really fast. When it gets wet, your feet don't get cold. So it's just the little things that you can think about on a trail can be the difference between having a great run and having a really bad day. So yeah, fit and what you're wearing in the shoe is really important.
That's some really good tips. The sock and shoe interface is one of the most important parts of off-road, and everyone's had those blisters and had those issues, whether it's been around the outside of their feet or their toes or under their feet or their heels. But one important thing, I think we now call it, don't do a McAndrew. Don't wear a pair of shoes off-road that are too wee for you, or you'll end up having no toenails left. But that's great, Finn. Again, loads more great little nuggets. We had a few people reach out to us on social media after our chat last week. So, folks, loads of you who are keeping in touch with us through our knowledge videos, do feel free to reach out to either myself or Finn. Our email addresses will be below, and also you can contact us through the watchyourmeta.com website. Finn, have you got anything else to add to this, or is that us pretty much blowing the doors off it?
Yeah, I think that's hopefully everything that people, you know, gives people a good start on, you know, where to look at with their trail shoes, and just encourage people, you know, it is amazing fun hill running and getting out there. Ferg talked the other week when we did our insights chat that, you know, hill running's so good for you to build strength. And I think that's a really key thing of off-road running, is it really works the muscles in a different way. So, you know, we're so lucky where we live in Scotland, you know, what we have on our doorstep. And don't be afraid. And the hill running community out there is amazing. You know, you'll meet people in the hills that are just, you know, everyone's lovely, and it's a really good way to get out there and explore the great outdoors.
It's also a great way of cross training for cycling as well, even doing hill running, because the kind of the leg angle and the kinematics that you put your leg through are very, very similar. And
yeah,
I noticed that after doing a few sessions of hill running, especially. Usually now you'll be looking forward to cyclocross season, and you've started doing a bit more running, etc. You'll see many professional cyclocross riders and mountain bike riders doing plenty of running. I mean, you look at any video of Sven Nys or Nino Schurter, and you'll see them out on the trails running. So don't be scared of, you know, getting a pair of trainers on, get a pair of trail shoes, get out in the woods, because I love running in the woods. It's just, I go for a run with the weight of the world on my shoulder, and I come out of it feeling like a brand new guy. So get out there, get in the trails. And if you need any help with this, folks, do reach out to us, and Finn and I will do our best to get back to you. But that's us for another week of the knowledge. We will continue on this running vibe for one more week, I think, Finn. We've got some more stuff up our sleeves for next week regarding what you should be thinking about when you come to running, as well as balance and exercises you can do at home to make you ultimately a more efficient runner. So stay tuned in for that. Next week, we will, of course, have our Monday weekly lockdown workout coming out every Monday at 9 o'clock. And on Wednesday, we'll have our next edition of the Insights. If you haven't caught that yet, we caught up with James Wright from Gallus Baffys on Wednesday. So give that a little look on our YouTube channel on the Insights playlist. But for now, from me and Finn, have a great weekend. And Finlay, I will see you next week, mate.